Hello, everybody, and welcome to another SIG Windows meetup. Thank you all for attending. I'll give you a couple of the updates that I'm aware of. At the Contributor Summit, which is right before KubeCon EU, Aline from Cloudbase is going to provide an update on SIG Windows. He's going to give him an update on some of the work that we did for the last release, 1.10, as well as some of the work that's coming up next, which includes the CI/CD testing, the group managed service accounts, and a lot of bug fixing. The two new developers from Apprenda that are working on our SIG have been making great progress. Mainly, some of the things that they've been working on is getting some Ansible and Vagrant scripts to set up the entire infrastructure both on-premise and in the cloud for SIG Windows, so they can get themselves familiar with that. And I think probably late this week they'll be ready to start doing some bug fixing. So my ask to Adelina and Patrick, and you guys probably have it, is to start filing some of the bugs that we're finding through our automation, so that they're ticketed as issues, so we can actually start addressing them.
Okay.
Go ahead, Patrick.
Yeah. I guess if you want to talk about any specific issues later, that's great. Otherwise, I got a quick update there. So I took some of the list of known issues and had a chat with Pengfi last week. Mm-hmm. So he's currently working on the metrics endpoint on the kubelet, and that's blocking the largest number of tests right now. Okay. Because there's a number of tests that try to basically scale up enough pods to fill a node. Well, since it's not reporting back the memory usage correctly, it just scales an infinite number of pods, and then, of course, that bad stuff happens eventually.
Okay.
So that's what he's working on right now for that specific issue. But yeah, the other ones, I agree, we need to get them linked over on the test Trello board. And Alessandro and Adelina, we're going to sort of work on clarifying a list of what the remaining PRs were that need to be merged, and then take that back to SIG testing probably in a week or two, but not this week because of the conference.
Okay, sounds good. If he needs any help, by the way, once he actually completes the coding for the metrics endpoint, let us know. Bob and our team here can give it a spin and make sure everything is good there.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great.
I didn't have any other update. I don't know if, Bob, is there anything else you want to mention on your end?
Well, I've been looking at Alan's Ansible scripts that he's got. I've got a couple small changes to make things maybe a little more portable, and hopefully later this week I'll have a Vagrant file that'll spin up VMs that work with the Ansible scripts as well, so it'll be easy to spin up an environment, but overall they look like they're working pretty well.
Excellent, thank you, Bob.
And which networking topology are you using, by the way?
This one is with the OVN and OVS.
Okay.
Since Aline and the other Aline are working on this from Cloudbase, it's OVN Kubernetes based. So if you guys, I know that you guys have a lot of scripts around the ACS, especially some of the stuff for Azure. Would those work on premise as well if we tried them, or would they only work on Azure?
So they're partially usable. Some of the ones to actually set up the services on the nodes would probably be usable. And so that's all in the ACS Engine repo. Today, it's currently using an Azure-specific CNI plugin, but I don't know if David's on the call. Oh, yeah, he is. But basically, we've got an effort to converge. So right now, there's two different CNI plugins. One's Azure-specific, and the other one is more generic, and that's the one that that Jason and David and Dinesh and Madan have been working on. And the goal is to eventually converge those two. So based on the configuration, it will either get the IP address range from the Azure VNet or from something that you've specified. And so once that's done, a little bit more of the scripts may be usable there. But you're kind of the biggest thing ACS Engine brings is it builds all the Azure Resource Manager templates, and that's the bulk of the code. But there are a number of PowerShell scripts that are run on the nodes that could be helpful too.
Got it. Yeah. So that, if we, I know you and I have a separate thread about some Azure specific testing. So maybe we'll be able to leverage these scripts if we go down that path and that route.
Yeah.
All right. Excellent. Any other update from anybody else?
Okay.
All right. Short meeting, I guess, today.
Well, so there's two other things on the agenda.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead.
So Cindy,
I actually had an update.
Okay, go for it.
So the Flex Volume plugins were for SMB and iSCSI were released to open source.
Mm-hmm.
So I should put up the link for that.
Oh yeah, this is Nick from Microsoft. So.
Oh, very nice. Yeah, we're looking forward to those.
So you have the ability to mount, like I said, SMB shares and iSCSI disks using the Flex Volume plugins. Also, we have provisionally done some work for provisioning storage as well. So if you give it a Windows server, it will provision iSCSI share or iSCSI disks and SMB shares. And in a feature branch, we have work for provisioning on an S2D storage cluster. So let me put that one in there.
And so we could probably set up a demo of that maybe like next week or the week after next.
Okay.
Yeah, so just let me know. We can put it on the agenda. Did you have anything else on that, Nick?
So there is a little bit of work for SMB. It doesn't need to be built. You just copy it into the appropriate folder for Flex Volume. For iSCSI, we do need to build some utilities. So I do have a Docker file to build it. It is quite large because Visual Studio is quite massive. But it should be fairly easy to follow. Ping me if you have any issues.
Okay, excellent. I just added that to the to today's notes, so everyone will have the link there. And then, so I think Cindy's. Do you have that demo that you wanted to show us today?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Can you guys you guys can hear me, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So my name is Cindy Xing. I work for Huawei PaaS infrastructure team. So this February, Huawei announced the Windows Server Container Service. It is based on Kubernetes, Microsoft Windows Server, and Huawei's cloud infrastructure. I believe this is the first cloud-native Windows Server Container Service in China. So I'm gonna share my screen. Okay, so we basically shift some real customer to our cloud infrastructure for Windows customers. And then behind the scene, we have our own container registry. And then the plugin, we implemented our own CNI. We also created our own Flex Volume storage plugin and connecting to Huawei's volume block storage, some of the details. So today I'm gonna do a demo of a real customer scenario. So this customer is in China, Sichuan. And then this customer has a very traditional .NET web application. The web front is IIS based, and then backend using Microsoft SQL Server. So through reverse engineering, we converted this application into a Docker container image, and then deployed to Huawei's Windows Container Service. So for the web front, we are running as a Windows container, a Kubernetes service. For SQL Server, because you all know Microsoft SQL Server Container Enterprise is not GA yet. So we are having the IIS web front talking to Huawei's relational database service through ELB. Okay. So here, what I'm gonna show you is So at Huawei's cloud, sorry, it's showing as Chinese. I'm not sure how much you understand. Here I have a Windows cluster with Windows 1709 as the work node. So this is a work node. And then we have two ways for customer to deploy their applications. One is through UI, the other is through like a command line to allow customers enable automation. For the time sake, I'm gonna use automation to command line to show you. As you can see, I've already deployed some pods and then services. So the A8 top is the customer's application. And then here you can see I'm getting an external IP. This is the customer's application. And then it's pretty straightforward. If needed, I can also deploy a new one. I think you all got to know how to do this, so I don't plan to show you. So I can create a new deployment and create a new service. And then, so, that's pretty much it is. Any question, comments?
Well, it's great to see that up and running. Are you able to share which network plugin you're using for that? And were there any other challenges or areas that you think the SIG needs to work on improving to make it work better for you?
Sure. I think as I mentioned, for the CNI plugin, they basically call directly to the HNS shim to have our own CNI. From network topology perspective, we are using L2 bridge with the VX line of rerouting. That's our approach. We do plan to learn from the flat node overlay solution and see how we can do there. Overall, the challenge is around understanding how Windows kernel apply the network policy and then route all those. I think Dinesh folks share me some PowerShell script, which is really helpful for the troubleshooting. Then the other challenge is around the monitoring. I think you and I have an offline email on that. So for our cloud infrastructure, we do have a monitoring solution. The challenge is in the Kubernetes for Windows Container Service, we still don't have the kernel support, like exposing all the metrics through a CPU advisor endpoint. So we are waiting for it. The other one I want to say is the Microsoft SQL Server container support, because as you can see, the application I'm showing is a very typical .NET web application. They all use Microsoft SQL Server as a backend. So, yeah.
Well, I mean, the SQL Server support is a little bit more complicated than that, because it not only will require official certification of running SQL Server into a container, and that's on Microsoft end, but then we need to support stateful sets with Windows Server containers in Kubernetes. So there's another feature that we need to support. So you can actually have named instances and dedicate, and depending if you're going to use SQL Server always on or an earlier version of SQL Server, so you can properly deploy that cluster of SQL servers into your environment. So I don't think we're going to get to stateful sets for GA. It looks like we might get to it later, especially since we don't have anybody working on it yet. But that's something that we definitely have on the roadmap from a SIG Windows perspective. I don't know about Microsoft and SQL Server.
Yeah, so I talked to the SQL Server team, and they're they do have a plan to get to GA with Windows containers. I'm not sure. But they've said they're working on it, but I don't think that they've really given any more specifics beyond that. I just know that it's currently a work in progress. When it comes to the stateful sets, I think that the plugin that Nick had is a good first step there. What's the other gap that's needed for getting a stateful set working?
I think it might just be some of the SIG node specifics in terms of how you pin different workloads and how you name them. Well, I don't know if it's actually SIG node or SIG cluster ops or one of those.
Okay.
But it might not be as complicated as we think. It's just the fact that it will require a lot of testing for us to actually validate that. It's not so much development work, but more testing, I believe, from the last time we looked at it.
Okay. Yeah, I'm checking to see if there's a conformance test on it.
Just want to say some of the customers, they may not care about the consistency or like auto replication, those kind of things. Some of the small companies, they can do the backup or replication or failover themselves. But I do agree, like the stateful set support is gonna be useful.
Yeah, I mean, if a customer ended up, if stateful sets were not supported and you deployed an always-on type cluster with continuous replication across the board, and losing a node wouldn't impact you, and that would be a healthy cluster. But that again goes back to what Patrick mentioned earlier, that SQL Server doesn't really officially support being inside a container just yet.
Yeah. So
the other part is that PR that Patrick, not the PR, but the issue that Patrick filed on the group managed service accounts.
Mm-hmm.
That's also going to be important because you want to run some of these workloads under certain identities as well.
The other thing, Patrick, I was able to talk to a storage team from Microsoft. So for Windows Server, we are supporting the space storage direct, right? I was wondering, like, if we could leverage that for stateful set Windows Server container, because that support data replication, shared volume.
Yeah, and that's actually part of what Nick is working on.
Okay.
So that if you look at that repo he's got, I believe there's an SMB provisioner that uses storage spaces direct. Is that right, Nick?
Sorry, yes. So there's a feature branch for S2D that can directly provision scale-up file servers in S2D. So if you look at the feature branches, there's an S2D feature branch, but that is only currently supporting scale-out file servers. We're trying to decide if we want to support more by directly carving out S2D volumes or putting them on a singleton file server. The other option is that you manually create your volume and then use the SMB provisioner. So it's a little bit confusing, where you manually create your storage and use SMB or iSCSI, or we point it at a S2D cluster which has a pool of storage that's unprovisioned, and we manually carve out the volume with the S2D provisioner. I hope.
I think this is an advantage for this Windows SIG, because the kernel supporting the auto data replication. This is a cool technology. If we can enable it for Windows Server container, that's an advantage comparing to Linux container. Yeah. So I'm an advocate, like we can push for this one. Yeah. Otherwise, I think overall it's pretty smooth. And then they work with Microsoft folks. They are very supportive. Yeah. Thanks for that.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah. Thanks for showing us that. Let's see. So the other thing I wanted to mention that I forgot last week was, I've also been following the progress on something called virtual kubelet. And this is a a project that was, I guess it was announced at KubeCon in like November, but basically there's a combined effort between Microsoft, Amazon, Hyper.sh, and VMware to be, huh? Oh yeah, and Huawei.
Okay.
Sorry, yeah, that's right. Yeah, you were there last week. But basically, there, I've got all the links there in the notes if anyone wants to follow it. But sort of, the goal of that project is for all the different cloud providers, both private and public, that offer basically containers as a service offerings, to create a way for people to use the Kubernetes API to sort of be able to leverage that in their own deployments. And so they're currently drafting use cases and things around that, but there's actually working code available. So I'll try to show that in a couple weeks. But one of the things I've been watching in there is that a lot of the challenges that we're facing, where there's functionality in the kubelet that is specific to Linux, they're also facing as part of the virtual kubelet project, because they're not really representing a full node. They're representing some other source of capacity to run containers. So it's been an interesting project to follow. And so if you're not familiar with it, I recommend at least take a quick look at the docs, and I can do a demo later. But I think that a lot of the people here in SIG Windows would probably have some overlap there, particularly if you're working on a cloud service. So we can talk more about that later. That's all I had for today. Did anybody have anything else?
All right, that's it then. Thank you all for attending. Thank you, Cindy, for the demo and the information. This is awesome. Great progress on that. And we'll see you guys next week. Bye all.
All right. Bye.
Thanks.